I ran for Congress, first time I'd ever run for any office, because I want to come up here and fight for people. Because there are folks back home that are frustrated, that feel like their government is not being responsive to their needs, and so I'm here to represent them and be a voice for those people. I think of the home builder in Monroe, North Carolina, who's told me he's just struggling just to keep his head above water, and that he'll take any kind of work just to keep his crew intact, so he can keep them together. He'll do remodeling work or anything, just not even worried about profit so much as just being able to keep afloat. I think about the families across the district of the 8th District of North Carolina who are looking to us for solutions. And so that's why I'm here tonight, to join this conversation, to talk about immigration reform. And the key to immigration reform, as far as I'm concerned, is we've got to look at compassion, and we've got to look at fairness. When it comes to fairness, we are a nation of immigrants, but we're also a nation of laws. And so we've got to make sure we are enforcing the law in this country and that we're respecting the rule of law when we look at making changes to immigration policy. We also need to look with compassion to those who have come here to the United States seeking that American dream when we try to determine what we're going to do going down the road. But I think the key to this is the approach we're taking here in the House of Representatives. The Senate has passed an immigration bill. It's a bill that was cobbled together behind closed doors. It was a bill, in my opinion, that went too far, too fast. We're taking a much more thoughtful approach here in the House. We're going to go through the committee process. We're going to bring legislation to the floor so that we can debate these key issues affecting immigration as single issues and let the American people take part in this conversation and tell us what they think about issues like border security. Now, the key to immigration reform, in my opinion, is we've got to secure the borders first. And any legislation that we pass out of this chamber, any agreement we make with the Senate on immigration, we've got to have a trigger so that no other pieces of this immigration puzzle fall into place until we've got that border secure. And so we're going to work hard to make sure that's part of our solution. And there's actually 5 pieces of legislation that have already passed out of Judiciary and Homeland Security committees. I serve on the Homeland Security Committee. We passed the Border Security Results Act of 2013, and what this does is requires the Secretary of Homeland Security to develop a comprehensive strategy to secure the border. What a radical concept. Let's actually have a plan. And so what we're saying in the House is, give us a plan. We want the Department of Homeland Security to work with the border sheriffs to come up with a plan to secure that border and come back to Congress and say, here's what we need. Here's the sections where we need fences. Here's the other types of technology, whether it be drones or other type of electronic monitoring. These are the pieces of the puzzle we need to secure this border. And then we also, a key to this is we've got to have a metrics so that we can measure whether the border is secure or not. Currently, we know the numerator, but we don't know the denominator. We know how many folks we're stopping coming across the border, but out of how many that are actually getting by that we aren't rounding up. And if you talk to any of the border sheriffs, you'll know that we're not anywhere close to being secure. And so that's a key component of this legislation. And I look forward to talking more about some of the legislation that came out of the Judiciary Committee, some of the pieces of this immigration reform puzzle that we need to discuss.
Well, I just want to say quickly, and I thank the gentleman for your statements, everybody here for your statements. Yeah, I'm a member of the Air National Guard. Just 2.5 months ago, I actually did missions on the border of Mexico and Texas, and the purpose of that mission was to, I fly a reconnaissance airplane, and the goal was to look for folks that had crossed illegally, and in most cases, we were actually looking 60 miles into Texas, and we were finding dozens of people, basically each time we'd almost look somewhere, catch 60, 100 a night. And I think of that to say, I felt bad for the folks that were hunkered down in Mott's, that had crossed the border, that were told by some coyote that they paid their entire life savings to, told by some coyote that ushered them over that once you step foot in America, you're going to be just fine. And then they realize that the journey actually begins. And what you'd see is, in many cases, the Border Patrol, who do very hard, tough work, would apprehend most of these folks, and in some cases, a couple of them would scatter, and they'd be left alone, 15 miles from the nearest town with no water, no food, and no idea where to go. I think of that, and I think of, frankly, the administration saying that the border is already secure. And I think what that leads to, and I'll yield to the gentleman from Wisconsin in a second to say, I think what that leads to is there's an epic lack of trust of Washington right now. That's why actually the four of us here came to Washington, is because we recognize there's a huge lack of trust in D.C. And so this idea that we're going to say, you know, from on high in Washington, we're going to just deem the border secure at some point when the administration has already deemed it secure, is I think where the lack of trust is and why there's so much emotion tied into this. And I think this is a beginning step in having a great discussion about how to actually tackle this problem in a way that both sides can agree with and that's fair to the American people and to folks that want to live the American life. Yield to the gentleman of Wisconsin.
And I appreciate the gentleman from Illinois yielding. And it is that very point. There's a lack of trust with the American people in Washington, D.C. And that's why we want to go through a step-by-step approach analyzing immigration and immigration reform. And as the gentleman from North Carolina said, we're here to fight for people. We're here to fix a broken system, and we're here to make it work. And we want to have a reform bill that's going to actually be fair to those who have come to participate in our economy, but be fair to people who are Americans that say we are a country of laws, and we also are a country of immigrants. I think the key first step is border security. That's what we've been talking about tonight, border security. And we have to debate, negotiate, discuss what does border security mean. And once we agree on what border security is, and once we secure the border, we can go to the next phase, which is to say we have millions of people who've come into our economy, into our country. What's the fair way to treat them? In my opinion, and I'm telling you my opinion, and I'm open to hear feedback from all kinds of people as we have this conversation and debate. I haven't dug my heels in. But number one, we have to say, do you get to go to the head of the line and become a U.S. citizen when you've come here without documentation? I don't know that that's the first step after border security. But what I do think we have to do is say, if you've come here and you've participated in our economy, we can offer some kind of legal status. A legal status that isn't citizenship, but it's a legal status that says, we're not going to arrest you in the middle of the night. We're not going to separate you from your grandparents or your kids. You can stay in our country because the border's secure. We're not going to have to address this problem 10 years from now or 20 years from now or 25 years from now. We've addressed the border, which means we've addressed the inflow of people coming to our country illegally. And when that happens, we can offer those without documentation a status that says you can stay here and you can work. But if you want to become a citizen, you're going to have to get to the back of the line. You don't get a special pathway into the front of the line. You can get in the back and you can become a citizen. But you can stay here legally, and by staying here legally, you can pay your taxes, but that doesn't mean you can vote. And that also doesn't mean that you can collect off the entitlement system that we have here in America. And I think as we have this conversation with those who are here without documentation and those who care about the laws in America, we can have a conversation that actually works for everybody, that everyone can agree to. And I look forward to that conversation on finding a pathway and a consensus forward that works for everybody. And with that, I yield to the gentleman from Colorado.
Well, the gentleman from Wisconsin brought up a great point.